Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Dashboard Fridays. I'm Adam from SquaredUp, and today I'm joined by my colleague Dan. Hey Dan.
Hey Adam, good to be here.
Thank you very much for joining me today. Today we're going to just give you a quick walkthrough of the out-of-box AWS dashboards. So these are the dashboards you get for free when you add the AWS plugin. They're sort of configured and ready to go and designed to give you a bit of a feeling for what you can dashboard from AWS, just to sort of help you get on your way, especially if you're brand new to SquaredUp. So Dan, I'll bring the dashboards up. Why don't you walk us through them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you say, so when you connect the AWS plugin, you get these 7 dashboards. They're all service-based, so they're around or focused around various AWS services. So the first one we have here is API Gateway. API Gateway is an Amazon service where you can create and maintain managed APIs and API gateways, essentially. So in this dashboard, we're showing the most sort of common metrics you may want to associate with your API gateways. So this is total number of requests, total sort of amount of data processed, the amount of 400 and 500 errors, as well as the request latency for your users. So like I said, if these are the most common sort of metrics, you may want to configure sort of monitoring around this. If, for example, the error number is particularly high, it could indicate something is going wrong with your API gateway or the backend service that is associated with your API gateway, and it may trigger your engineers to sort of look into any issues that could be occurring there. So moving on, we also have DynamoDB, which is Amazon's NoSQL database service. It's fully managed and sort of scalable. As you can see, we're pulling in the sort of all the tables that we are sort of associated with your DynamoDB instances. This is a dynamic scope, so we have the top 5 here. But if you have more than 5 tables, we can edit this scope to be sort of non-dynamic and pull in exactly what you need it to be. We also have some of the more common metrics here, again, associated with DynamoDB. So we have your consumed read capacity units, your write capacity units, as well as, we have a few blank tiles here, but that's just because we're not running any queries, for example, on this specific demo. But we also have get item as well, the total amount of get item requests, scans as well as put items. So various operations on your DynamoDB databases that you may want to see. And this is all configured by default. You can change this dashboard if you want it to. So if you want to pull in a metric that isn't here, you can do. Or if you want to remove a metric that isn't particularly relevant, you can also do that with this example dashboard.
Just a quick one on the dynamic scopes you mentioned. So the person using the dashboard can edit these scopes to be, say, like all of their tables or specific tables. They can pick a few. They can pick a few in different ways. Just to make sure that this dashboard actually works for everyone, we limit the scope to the first 5 objects in this case, just so if you have a million tables, the dashboard doesn't blow up. That's about right, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
Okay, great.
So moving on, we have EC2. So this is probably one of the more popular Amazon services. So this is Amazon's VM instance-based service. We can provision sort of managed VM instances. So again, we pull in information and metrics on your instances that you're running in your AWS environment. In this example, we've just got one simple web server. You can see we have again, the various metrics you want to see. So CPU utilization is a really common one, disk read ops, disk write ops, and your network metrics as well. So for example, if your CPU is particularly high, you may want to investigate that, or an engineer may want to investigate that, as it could mean there is a busy period on the application you're serving with the VM, or there might just be an issue where performance is going to be impacted by a high CPU utilization number. In the list of instances as well, so you can click on these tiles here and drill down into the instance. So if I were to click on our web server, for instance, it'll load some properties. So you can see some more metrics on this web server. If I scroll down as well, you can see where it is in relation to other AWS objects, so things like your persistent disk volume, for example. And if I scroll down more, you can see a few more relevant properties as well, so things like private and public IP addresses, for example. I'll be getting rid of this instance after this demo, so you can't query that IP address.
I guess just with talking like pretty classic IT ops metrics here. We've got the pretty awesome feature of being able to monitor any of this data. So if you weren't already monitoring that VM with some other tool that could alert you, you could set up some alerts, notifications in SquaredUp to tell you when the CPU is high or network's high or low, that kind of thing.
Exactly. You may want a notification channel that goes directly to your sort of cloud engineers or people who look after this particular EC2 instance, and you can trigger that alert through SquaredUp, like you say. So moving on, we have ELB, which is Elastic Load Balancer. Again, another AWS service. So this is load balancing front-end requests to one or more backends or backend services. So similar thing here, we can sort of drill down. We only have one load balancer here, but if you had multiple, it would show up here, and you can drill down into any number of them. We also have some common metrics, like you say. So we have active connections, so the total amount of active connections over time through your load balancer, the amount of data that's being processed, and again, the number of errors, so 400 and 500 errors, as these are sort of web requests we're serving through ELB. Like I said before, if this is particularly high, for example, your process bytes or your active connections are high or they spike, could indicate a busy period with the applications you're serving, or potentially some maybe even nefarious sort of DOS attacks or something like that you may want to investigate. And you could set up some notifications through SquaredUp for these as well. So moving on as well, we have Lambda as well. So this is AWS's sort of serverless function service. So again, we're pulling in sort of the top 5 Lambdas through our dynamic scope. As well as this, we have a few other sort of helpful tiles. So we have our logs, so most recent Lambda logs for your functions that you're using in your environment, as well as your Lambda duration, Lambda errors, throttles, executions, and invocations. Again, sort of really helpful metrics to know. Again, particularly with Lambda errors, Lambda durations can indicate sort of issues if they're particularly high or higher than usual, as well as invocations can just indicate busy periods of an application. So if you're serving a front-end application through Lambda, a high number of invocations could mean a busy period that you may want to handle. As well as this, we have Route 53, which is Amazon's managed DNS service. So this is by nature a bit of a simpler service. So we have a bit of a simpler dashboard. So we have our hosted zones that we're putting in DNS records in. Again, in this environment, we've just got the one. But we also have a metric for DNS queries through our zone, or zones, I should say. Again, may indicate busy periods of the application you're serving through DNS if this is particularly high or spiking, and you may want to set up an alert for this. As well as this, we have S3. So again, one of the more popular AWS services. It's an object storage service. So we're talking about buckets, really. Again, we have a dynamic scope set up. So we're pulling in our sort of 5 buckets here. Again, you can drill down. So if I was to click on any number of these, for example, it will show all the relevant properties to do with this bucket. And you can see some of them here. If I go back, we have a couple more metrics as well. So we have the number of objects stored in our S3 buckets, as well as our bucket sizes. If I hover over them, as you can see, they're breaking it down per bucket. This is obviously helpful to know. So if your application is dynamically using S3 and this spikes up, it could indicate that there's a busy period going on. As well as that, there's a sort of a direct cost element to this with S3. So you're charged based on how many or the number of or the amount of data, I should say, stored in your S3 buckets. And you may want to keep track of that. If it goes over a certain amount, you'll be charged accordingly. So again, may want to set up an alert accordingly for this one.
Cool. So a few good dashboards, and if you are sort of service focused, maybe you're just responsible for storage or for compute or serverless functions, that kind of thing. These are probably great starting dashboards. Otherwise, if you're thinking about applications or maybe like end-to-end cost or anything like that, you could take bits and pieces of all of these dashboards and actually put together something pretty cool, like your DNS routing to your through your load balancer and onto your serverless functions, or maybe some classic apps running on VMs. You could put together a really awesome dashboard, just taking bits and pieces from all of these. Nice.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else worth mentioning about the plugin? Anyone is maybe getting started with it? Anything they should know?
So I mean, it's possible to like we said before, I think it's dynamically scoped for a lot of these. So our buckets are dynamically scoped, so it'll pull in the most relevant ones. If you want to pull in more than, like you said before, the 5 that we have, or the 5 top ones, you can edit this. As well as that, you can edit any tiles on these dashboards. So, for example, with EC2, if there's an additional metric you'd like to see, it's as easy as hitting edit and adding a tile here, and then choosing from either our predefined metrics or running a query that we allow through AWS's API. So, like I said, it's a really good jump off point, but it's definitely possible to sort of add more metrics or remove any metrics that aren't relevant to you.
Nice. And if you've got multiple AWS accounts, you can add the plugin multiple times, and you could change the scope of these dashboards to be, your favorite services across all your AWS accounts, or that kind of thing. So it really breaks down some of those barriers you might otherwise be hitting with dashboarding in AWS natively. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. I'll go ahead and wrap us up really quickly. Well, first of all, thanks obviously to Dan for giving us a walk through those dashboards. If you need any help with anything, you can always head over to Community Answers at community.squaredup.com. It's SquaredUp's own community, but it's, people ask questions about all sorts of things: SQL queries, monitoring in general, which tools to use, how to achieve certain things in certain tools. It's a really worthwhile community to check out. And if you want to see any other examples from our other dashboard packs, head over to Dashboard Gallery, squareup.com/dashboard gallery. Yep, that's it for today. So thanks for joining us. Bye.